Welcome back, and let's talk about Giallo Poliziotteschi. For this episode, I recently watched Naked Violence, which I always have to think about. Be like, Naked Violence, not Naked You Die. Naked, violent. But this is the first Giallo by Fernando Di Leo, who kind of went on to make a career mostly in Poliziotteschi, and this movie, I will say, is more so Poliziotteschi. There is a whodunit mystery, but I mean that's kind of crime. A lot of crime thrillers in general, or so. But this one definitely kind of straddles the line of the two, and I would say, not to say that it is not Giallo, but it definitely leans a little bit more into Poliziotteschi, although it's not super action packed. I mean, this movie is available in one of two Fernando Di Leo Poliziotteschi box sets. So that kind of shows you. I mean, like Slaughter Hotel is not. I will say this also before getting into it. Fernando Di Leo, just based off of the two movies of his I've seen so far, which are Slaughter Hotel and Naked Violence, he seems way better at making Poliziotteschi films than Giallo films. For those of you who saw my Slaughter Hotel Jolly Tally, I was not feeling that movie. And, joke's on me, I own it now. But I did not really care for that movie. But it did very well in the tally. Anyways, on to the review, I guess. So the first thing I will say about this movie is going into it, I knew it was going to be like, I know what the opening of it was, is that it's about this crime that happened in this night school situation where this female teacher is assaulted and murdered by her students, and they're all troubled boys. They're all criminals. They're aged between 13 and 20, but the vast majority of them seem to be 16, although they all seem to be played by actors older than that, but I don't know. But yeah, all these kids are kind of in and out of reform school, but they're criminals. Some of them are described as being alcoholics and gamblers, and others are like thieves, pickpockets, mythomaniacs. Like some of them are just like compulsive liars, but they're all in this classroom situation because they need help, and this teacher wants to help, but the opening of the movie it's a very like quick version of, you just see all the boys sitting in the classroom and them all kind of like rushing the teacher and them all taking swigs from this giant bottle of alcohol that has this kind of like white cloudy color to it, and then it cuts immediately to the police in the classroom and like looking over the bodies covered up. They take a look and they start talking about it, and I will say my first impression with this is, I thought that was going to be way more graphic going into it, because I knew that's how it opened. So I thought we were going to see something rough, but the movie does this intentionally, obviously, because it doesn't want to show you what happened. It just wants to show you this is the understanding that we as the police have moving forward while we investigate it. And the main detective on the case is played by Pier Capponi, who this is his first Giallo. Goes on to be in Forbidden Photos and I think like Seven Bloodstained Orchids and such. I will say the first moment he showed up, I was like, oh, Alberto de Mendoza's in this. And I realized then that I like both these actors. I probably prefer Alberto de Mendoza because he's been in more stuff, but both of them are always like great performers, but they do look kind of similar. Unless you see them side by side, you can really see the differences. To me, I see one and I think I automatically just think it's Alberto de Mendoza. So apologies to Pier Paolo Capponi. But anyways, so he is the main detective on this case. And the first like act of the movie is him interrogating these boys one by one. And they all are essentially taking a vow of silence. They're all saying the same story, like, it wasn't me, the rest of the others made me do it. And before we jump into these interrogations, we know that Capponi's character has a reputation of being a more hard-boiled detective, the kind of cop who's not afraid to break the law. Your Dirty Harry type. Like, he's not afraid to rough up some people. And there was a great bit where he asks not to have a tape recorder, but to have a stenographer. And I think it's the judge or the police captain or whoever is his boss knows that he wants a stenographer because he doesn't want there to be the sounds of him hitting people because, it's going to come up on a record. But if you're only typing what people are saying, it's not going to show up on the record. And he's warned off. He says, listen, these are kids. You cannot touch them. You can't hit them. You just can't. Like, we will lose this. And so he's kind of got to rein himself in. He's like, okay, I've got to use my brains on this, my wits. And so he's forced. You don't really ever see at least in the first part of the movie, you never really see his hard-boiled side, but he's forced to take the more soft-boiled, like, okay, I got to go by the books type of thing. But even then, he doesn't really. He's got some methods up his sleeve that he's like, well, I mean, I didn't touch them. I didn't, but it's like he's still threatening them. But anyways, the other thing we learn going in is that the kids all drank this something aniseed, and it's like super alcohol. It's super duper strong, 80% or 80 proof or something. And they all say that like one sip would make these kids like violently drunk, and even a hardened alcoholic after one sip would be like terribly intoxicated. And not just intoxicated, no, because no, this alcohol, you see, makes you go mad with like almost like rabies, like this sexual aggression. And which until now I'm thinking, oh, it's kind of like what happens to you in the screw fly solution. But anyways, so you get all these kids were passing the bottle around, taking the bottle out of each other's hands, taking swigs. And so they all instantly got very violently, sexually, aggressively drunk. And going into the interrogations, this is kind of convenient for all of them because they're able to use this as a defense. Like, well, I don't remember what happened. I didn't, and some of them are trying to say that, like, listen, the others made me drink it. I didn't want to, but they like forced me to. And as he goes from person to person, there's just always this sense of it wasn't me, it was everybody else. And you're like, okay, so it was always everybody else. It was never any of the individual people. And the kids kind of know that. I mean, first off, nobody wants to be a rat. They all have this street reputation, or they all have this is mostly the life that they live, and they know the consequences of ratting out anybody, or, just trying to spare yourself. So if there is somebody who is innocent or knows something, they're not going to say it because they're afraid of what will happen to them because of the group. And then along with that, they all know that if they can hold the line, they can get away with this, because if none of them individually or can be charged, and I think this is supposed to be making a comment on the present judicial system that was going on. I don't know that for certain. I do know this is based off of a book by what was his name, Giorgio Scerbanenco, I ragazzi del massacro. And again, excuse me if I butcher that. Italian's not my main thing. But also, Fernando Di Leo did take many liberties, and there's many differences between the film and the book, the story that this is based off of. But going back, it seems like there is an inherent flaw in the judicial system where it's like, well, if we can't know for certain who is to blame, then we can't really punish anybody further. We can't just send them all to prison, and they all are kids. So at the end of the day, they're just going to go to this reform school, which I think is called Beccaria or something. And whoever is most responsible, if there is someone, they're like hoping that they can toe the line and just everybody goes to this reform school and that's it. And they all avoid specifically the person who's at fault or responsible, just avoids any further consequences. And so this is what Capponi's character has to deal with as he's going through, is that they're all just being silent, stiff-arming him in terms of just not giving him anything to budge. But through the course of the interrogations early on, he does pick up on a few things. One of the boys he picks up on is not like the others, and it's never said explicitly until later when Capponi's talking to his partners, his superiors. He's like, I forgot what the kid's name was. It's not really important, but he's like, he's not like the others. Like, how so do you mean? They're like, he's gay. And so he would have had no interest in taking part in this. I mean, if he gets intoxicated, it's like a miracle alcohol, so it'd make you do anything. But he was like, but he cannot be the one who is at fault here. It's got to be someone else, because he's not interested in women, or at least he doesn't think he is. So that's like their first clue of something. But again, he's never really able to go anywhere. And as it goes on, he learns another little bit of information from someone else, in that there may have been an older woman who was the ringleader, who kind of planned this. And the kid who gives this information all of a sudden kind of starts flip-flopping. He'll be like, oh, the woman, the man, the woman, or the man. And he, so he gives information, but then he's going back on it. And then he's like, sounds like he's just like, he's completely muddying the water. So you really don't know if he actually did give information, or if this is all part of some misdirect to just throw them off and to waste more time so these kids can get away with it. Well, this is also very interesting. Capponi is using the alcohol in the interrogations. So he's just like pouring it all over the floor, pouring it on the chair, and forcing them to sit in it. And like the smell of it and like the fumes of it is kind of getting them back in this like state that they were in when they committed the crime. Because when they all got picked up, they were all like drunk, and I think they were either coming off of it, but they were, it was kind of like a daze, like oh man, I don't really fully remember what happened, but he's hoping that he can like trigger something in any of them. Well, this ends up getting back to Pier Paolo, Capponi's boss, and he's like, I know what you're doing. They told me. And he's like, you can't do that. And if this gets out to the courts, what you're doing, we're going to be in trouble. So you can't do that. And like, but he pleads with him like, no, I have something. Like, I know some stuff. But everything he says, it's like, okay, well, how do you know that they're not just lying to you? Like, I questioned them all as well, and I didn't get anywhere. But he gets to a point where it's like, let me just like keep investigating. You can put them all in holding, but let me continue this case. So he's granted it, and he's also given like 2 other detectives to kind of go along with him. And so they take the lead that there's an older woman that some of the boys might have been meeting with outside of school. Pier Paolo Capponi is going around with this social worker who's played by Nieves Navarro in also her first Giallo film. And so they're going around, and immediately, this is like halfway through the movie, immediately I'm thinking, is she the woman? Are they going to pull a fast one on us? Because they haven't really introduced a lot of women in the movie. But anyway, so they're going around interviewing people, and he goes and he talks to, the parents of this kid, and talks to the parents of this kid, and he used to hang out at this pinball bar. Okay. And then he starts talking to the person who runs the place, and he's questioning everybody about, did you ever see them with an older woman, or asking them about any drinking tendencies. And again, they're not really getting anywhere. And like one of the kids' fathers is just like, yeah, well, they all run with like an older woman. Like that, he's like the way things are nowadays, it's like all the women are all kind of whores. And then he looks at her and he's like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like all of them. I just mean that it like a lot of them are. Ultimately, they're not really getting anywhere. And it's kind of the same thing with the interrogations, where how much of this is actually proof versus, because he kind of says like we could be following this for months, and by then they're already going to get sent up to the reformatory. But and then this is us going into like the near to the final act, and this is where I'll kind of like leave it. Going into the final act, you find out that one of the boys, the boy who is, maybe this is a little spoiler, but the boy who is gay, gosh, it's like, how do I say this without YouTube being an asshole? He jumped off of a roof, and he's not with us anymore. And the detective is like, do you know he did that, or was he pushed? And they're like, well, I mean, all the kids were kind of in a group, but then somebody noticed that one of them wasn't there. But as far as we can tell, he did it himself. And then this other detective is like, I was on the scene, I showed up, he was on the roof, I went to the roof, and he said, back off, I'm gonna jump, or I'll jump. And he was like, I backed off, and he ended up eventually jumping anyway, rushed him to the hospital, but he was dead. He was like dead on arrival. So one of the main kids, who probably wasn't involved, at least to the detective's main theory, is now dead. And he's basically being told off of the case, like, we can't do anything anymore. Like, we've already now, like, we're not getting anywhere, and we've just lost one of the kids, which can fall on us. And Pier Paolo Capponi is just like, please, let me take one of the kids. Let me take one of the kids out of the reform place. He's like, we're not going to get anywhere questioning them. Let me have one. Let me bring him back, and he can stay at my place, and give me a few days, and I'm going to just treat him like a human, and I'm going to get him to trust me, and I will get somewhere. And they're like, you can't do that. What if something happens? What if he escapes? What if he, attacks somebody? What if he, he also jumps off of a roof? Like, that's going to come on us. And he's like, you have to trust me. You have to let me. And his boss is like, fine. But if something happens, not only are you done, you're going to jail, and I'm going to kick your ass myself before we send you. And so then that's like the last 30 minutes, and I don't want to say anything beyond that, but he takes one of the kids, and there's a great series of scenes where it's like, this kid who's just trying to be like a punk, and he's being treated like a human. They bring him in, they're like, you can he takes him back to the social worker. Actually, it's like, you can come back to my place. And they're like letting him take a shower to clean himself up. They're feeding him, and they're like, you can eat as much as you want. And he's just like, and then they're like, do you want some wine? And he's just like, and then it's like cuts to him, and he's eating a pear, and he's just like, and then they let him sleep, and he sleeps on like a real bed, and he's just like knocked out, just I hope you like my acting. And then they take him around town, and they get him like a nice like suit, and so like he's all dressed up, and the going around, and everything just looks really good. And they're going out to restaurants, they're having a good time, and so he's really hoping that he's gonna be able to get something out of this kid. And I'll leave it at that. I will say, in terms of this being like a giallo that you must see, I will say it is very talky. It is, you really do, it's a very fast-paced questioning, interrogations going around, which a lot of giallos are like that. So you really do have to, or gialli, you really do have to be paying attention. If people are talking and all of a sudden you're looking at your phone, or all of a sudden you're looking somewhere else, you're going to miss a few lines, and those lines might be the linchpin of the entire scene, of like where they get this information. All of a sudden you'll be in the next scene, you're like, wait a minute, wait, I'm sorry, now they're talking about an older woman, like where did this come up? So it is very fast paced. You do have to pay attention. It's not terribly action packed, so some people might say it's boring or it's just hard to get into. I did watch it twice, but this week I've been trying to watch a giallo a day, and sometimes I'm forced to watch it at work, and I'm not able to actually like sit consistently and watch it, and I can't like pause it. So I have to like wait, to rewatch it when I get home, or in the case of Naked Violence and Psych Out for Murder. Well, Psych Out for Murder I rewatched when I got home. Naked Violence I woke up early. It is well, it's about the time I wake up for work anyway, but I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning to rewatch the movie so I could then cut this before I went off. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I mean, if you're watching this and you're curious about Giallo films, I'd say it's not essential. If you're very like, well, I'm only going to see the ones that I really need to, then you don't need to worry about it. But if you're a completionist, I would say check it out. I would definitely say check it out. And especially if you're a fan of Italian genre cinema and you're a fan of Poliziotteschi, then yes, because Fernando Di Leo made so many Poliziotteschi films, and this is that hybrid of Poliziotteschi and Giallo. So it's really interesting to kind of see this body of work, and then Slaughter Hotel, which not great. Slaughter Hotel is not quite it. I mean, it's a Giallo, but it's also like kind of feels like it's trying to be a gothic horror movie. I don't know. That movie is a hodgepodge of other things, and because that movie was like pornographic borderline, I was really expecting a lot more from this movie, but it was actually very tame. And then the violence, you do see what happened at the end, at least a little bit more, and it's very, very tame. Like the worst you see is like someone like honking the teacher on the breast. That's the worst of it. And it's not like I wanted more, I just kind of expected more because of Slaughter Hotel. But yeah, I would say for a movie that's as the subject matter is as graphic as it is, it's actually very tasteful and very tame. And what else can I say about this movie? The directing is fine. It's not too artsy, it's not too flashy. It's mostly kind of in place and moving around. There's some good tracking shots outside. I noticed that Fernando Di Leo likes to end a lot of some of his scenes with something covering the camera, like someone walking to the foreground, or something like that, like somebody sitting in a chair and then standing up and it blocking the camera, which you see that like 3-4 times and you're like, okay, so that's your thing. Bava likes to, focus rack out, then focus rack back in. You like to do this. The music, when it did come in, the music was good, although there were like 3 or 4 usages of stingers at the end of a scene, like ding, ding, type of thing, that didn't really work because a lot of time a stinger is kind of just like a really strong nudge to the audience, like that person is someone to watch out for. But it did it at times where there wasn't anything that like jumped out, and so you're like, okay, so am I supposed to be suspicious of this person? At a point, it kind of like, thankfully they only did it like 3 or 4 times, but if they did it anymore, it'd be like, dude, you got to cut that shit out. But it wasn't the end of the world. What else can I say about this? I think it's interesting that Pier Paolo Capponi and Nieves Navarro are both in this, and then they're a year or 2 later, they're both in Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. I would probably say Forbidden Photos is a better movie for a lot of reasons, but it's not like a way better movie. Like, if you heard my opinion, like, I'm just not crazy about Forbidden Photos. I'm not crazy about that type of Giallo. All of these movies that I'm mostly doing, I'm watching in terms of somewhere someone has said it's a Giallo. And I know that sometimes things can be incorrect, but it's like, okay, so this is in Troy Howard's book, and I covered it in the Forgotten Giallo film series. Okay, so Troy Howard says it's a Giallo. He can justify it. Fine. A lot of other Giallo movies I'll probably end up covering. It's like, okay, well, it was under Arrow's Giallo films on their catalog, or it was under Vinegar Syndrome's Giallo films in their catalog. So that's where you get some weird ones. Like, recently, Arrow has some movies in their Giallo catalog that you look and you're like, that I wouldn't call that a Giallo. But because genre is so fluid, because Giallo in general is even more fluid, I will always just kind of present this and leave it to you to decide. I'm not saying this movie's not. I'd say, it kind of is. But check it out if you haven't, and decide for yourself. And if you've seen it, if you're about to see it, let me know what you think. Do I have any other things to say? Any closing thoughts? Anything else I wanted to mention? I don't think so. I guess I'll just wrap this up. Well, thank you for watching. If you made it to the end, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be doing more of these, so thank you. This is Tanner Leeser for TheKingInGiallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
Costate.
Va bene.
Me le tagli molto alte, eh?
Te cosa vuoi?
A te, pirla.